So I'm Lana, and today I'm alone. I'm alone with Justin Bailey. Thank you for joining. And I wanted to start out by just asking a couple of simple questions about you. Who are you, Justin Bailey?
I am a real estate attorney. I work with Reynolds Law Office, main office out of Lancaster. I am local to the area, grew up in Clinton and, various other towns in Central Mass, but, from the area.
I've known you for a while. How long have we been working together?
As long as I've been an attorney, so nine and a half years, just about.
Nothing like aging me some more. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, so you're 9.5 years?
Just about.
But you didn't start at Craig Reynolds.
No, I started with a larger firm out of, Boston.
I think that's where we
Mass.
met, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And now you're there.
And now I'm local. So.
How many transactions do you do yourself a year?
That depends on the year. We handle refinances, which some years we close hundreds and hundreds of refinances, when interest rates were in the 2s and 3s. The good old,
Yeah, those were the good old days.
Those were the good days, not so old. But, typically sale transactions, 350 to 500.
A year?
Yep.
And that's not refinance? Or
That's 3 to 6 with refis, typically around, at least, 300.
So what's your staff look like? You must have a ton of staff.
We actually don't. We have 3.
Oh, those poor.
Well, we're a pretty well-oiled machine. I think we've had most of our staff has been with us for quite some time, and we kind of segment things. Mm-hmm. So, we have our more client-facing paralegal. She deals with the intake. She deals with the lenders. And she really sets the schedule. She's the organizer. You know what I mean? She is a key person, keeps everything on track.
She keeps you in line, too.
Keeps me in line. Absolutely. Yes, you need it because, there's doing the work and there's dealing with the people and you have, dealing with clients, dealing with realtors, dealing with lenders. Within any given transaction, I mean, how many people do you have to keep track of? Half a dozen at least, times, 300, 400, 500.
So she handles all of that in your office?
She does. She's, like I said, a key person. And, not so much on refinance. It's only on the buyer side, which is still significant.
Yeah.
I'm counting seller representation in that, those numbers.
Yeah.
So on the seller side, we have a paralegal that's the key person for sales. Mm-hmm. So sort of same role, but other side of a transaction. Mm-hmm. And we have a few closing paralegals that actually do the, what we're signing at closing. They've prepared. They've done the balancing and the calculations with the lenders. We have 2 title examiners on staff. So a lot of real estate firms buy their title work from title examiners. We do 95% of our title work in-house.
Wow. I think I heard that from Craig Reynolds, but I don't remember that. So they get all of your business, the 2 of them, to do that many transactions.
They're employees, yeah. So obviously, been in business for... Craig's been there as long as I've been alive. So, the back work, the library of titles is in the tens of thousands. Mm-hmm. It does make it easier, obviously, when you're familiar with developments and condominiums. And, there are some neighborhoods that we do transactions in. I know everything about this neighborhood, which is great. That's, that makes life a lot easier.
It is.
When you get further out of field, you might not be as familiar with the town. There are more questions. You don't know everything about the intricacies of, that particular town. You know where to get that information, but you don't just have that basis.
I think about the sole practitioners, right, that do real estate transactions. That must be challenging for them because they don't have the library that you have, the back history of these properties. I mean, even like the subdivisions or the things that happen. I mean, or the condo complexes. I don't know. I think about that. It's like, how do they? That must be a lot more work for them. Do you get calls from other attorneys asking? Like they see you've done the title work before? Do you guys have that like networking? I don't even know that.
Within a transaction, or if it's people that you know and you deal with frequently, they might call you. You know, people are afraid to look like they don't know things sometimes. You know, the longer you do this, the more you realize you're not going to know everything. You're never going to know even close to everything. You have to be learning constantly. I actually did get a call from a buyer's attorney property that I'm handling the sale of, asking me questions. He had his 170-page title exam, and he's an out-of-state attorney. And he was asking me about something to do with an order of conditions, and he was unfamiliar with this town. He's really not that familiar with the Commonwealth, and
wow.
I'd certainly practicing in multiple states is, I would imagine. I'm licensed in Massachusetts only, but I can imagine that would make things even more difficult.
Yeah, because I'm only in one state too, and I find that just going that much farther is just so much more on your plate. I mean, I'm solo. I don't have a team and stuff, but you have a whole office. So we've worked together. My hours are 24/7. 7 days a week. I can't imagine. Now, I don't call you generally on a weekend or anything, but I can't imagine you're not working behind the scenes on a weekend. How do you keep up with the flow of that?
I get a lot done on the weekends. I can get more done, in a few hours. Luckily, I live right down the street from our main office. I have an office at my house, but, I do tend to work after work sometimes.
What is your hours? Like, what do you feel like how many hours do you think you clock in a week?
It depends. Is it summer, or is it, February is kind of when you catch a break, and no one's really buying and selling houses in February. It's cold, it's dark. But, the summertime, well, really spring to fall is just
non-stop.
Thankfully busy. It is weekend. Usually I'll work at least a morning, or maybe, it depends again. But I can get more done in 4 hours than I can in 8 when the phone's not ringing, because
or emails.
When clients call, they have a question, you've got to drop your file and pick up a file and open it up, and
And do you just focus on residential, or are you also commercial?
I do some commercial.
Is it that different?
It's not that different. There are more. There's more work behind a commercial file. I only work with one lender for commercial closings, and that's just based off of a relationship I have. That's not the focus of our practice. So, on the commercial side, it comes with, you have to provide zoning opinions. You're typically drafting all of the closing documents. It can be varied.
Oh, you have to draft for the banks?
Some. So it's a lot more work.
Yeah. And it's almost like you have to do that regularly.
Yes. So there's one lender that I do it for, and it's typically for a couple of clients I have that are investors. And starting to get into that, that's not our focus.
Well, not at the magnitude that you're doing.
No. It's a lot more involved, and there's more involved. It's, the contracts are different. You're having to deal with the municipality far more, depending on what type of project it is.
Right.
I am starting to get more into, land use planning. I have some builder clients now, and, development. So title works, dealing with the old, development is the new.
Wow. I'm surprised, because I don't see a lot of that around here, but I suppose there's probably the initiative to do it, but I think maybe the dollar amount is hard for people to justify.
You see the cost of a lot of new construction properties.
Kidding.
It is difficult. It depends on the town and the project. Larger developments can take years.
Yeah.
To, from, okay, we're buying this piece of property, to we're through the due diligence, the planning.
Right.
Every town board.
Right.
So
So take me through this. So getting an idea, if you want to become a real estate attorney, it's not a 9-to-5 job.
No.
It could be, but it's not. You won't be able to stay up with the level that you're at. And so I find in my team, I love my team. I have an attorney and a lender, me. We work together really well, and we get to understand what each other can do. I mean, I've actually had to ask you, could you please get this signed because I'm on the road? What is something that you can think of that would be helpful for a buyer to be prepared, that they should know or seek out to look for when they're starting their process? Maybe it's not something legal, but to be prepared. So I guess I'm kind of focusing on, not the process of going out and looking at properties and stuff like that, but just being prepared when they're coming eventually to you for the closing.
Educating themselves on the process. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, especially first-time home buyers, they have no idea. Mm-hmm. You don't know if you haven't bought a property. I had done hundreds of closings by the time that I bought my first house. And it's different when it's you, but, doing some homework, figuring out what options are available for you for financing. What are your what are your financial goals? Where do you want to be? And contacting people that can help you with that, building your team within a transaction these are the people that are going to get this done for you.
Right.
I want this. Who's going to help me get that? Help me get this done.
Do you find some of your buyer clients are nervous to call you?
Sometimes, especially younger people. The education side of it for buyers, especially first-time buyers or sellers, just because someone owns a house, they might have lived there 30 years. The last time they were involved in a real estate transaction was 30 years ago, or 20 or 10, or this is something it's probably the most significant financial transaction of someone's life. They've maybe done it 1 or 2 or 3 times, been through the process, and it's where they live most often. So it's not just the transactional side, it's personal. This is where they live. So I try to remember that. We try to make things accessible for people. Mm-hmm. I'm not an attorney that uses 10 words when 2 will do. It's not, the point is not to, make ourselves seem grand or overly intelligent. It's to get what we need for our client and to make it accessible and understandable for them. So
do you make them feel like when you call them, I guess the first time you're going to really talk to them is at the purchase and sale stage when they've already have an offer received. I just feel like sometimes my buyers, I'll say, okay, the next step, you're going to be talking to the attorney. And, this might be the first time they've ever talked to an attorney in their life.
Yep.
And I think the stigma is, an attorney? First of all, they're thinking money. Second of all, they're thinking they're not going to understand anything, because then they call me and they're like, did you read the document, Lana? And I'm like, I did, but if you have questions, you need to call the attorney. Do you find that your conversations with them are just not, like, they're lost in it, like they're not focusing? Or do you find like you build that rapport with them and they feel comfortable calling you?
Depends on the person. I like when clients are interested in the process and want to learn and take an active role. And that's the intake for me is one of the most important conversations. You know what I mean? I need to understand the property, which I will do on my side. That's my preparation once I, know that I'm going to represent someone buying or selling it. And I need to understand the person. What are their goals? Everyone's different.
You ask them, what's their goals?
Yes.
Wow.
What are we trying to get out of it? Interview me. Are you buying or selling or both? What's you're purchasing a property?
I've never purchased one. This is my first one.
First one. Okay.
I'm super scared.
Okay. So, Lana, this is your first time purchasing a property. Are you aware of the process? Typically I tell them, what my role is going to be. And I say that I'm going to handle the contract, the title, and the closing for them.
Contract, title, closing. Okay.
So the contract, they've already signed a contract most of the time by the time they get to me.
Yep.
The purchase and sale is more detailed, more thorough, may involve provisions, contingencies, repairs, things that we've nailed down between the offer and inspections or anything like that. So I always explain to people, the offer is a skeleton of a contract. The purchase and sale is the full body.
Oh.
So we're fleshing it out. It's more.
I like that.
The title, most buyers are not going to have any idea on the title side.
No, tell me what a title is.
So the title is, that's sort of an abstract thing, but title is just the chain of ownership of this particular piece of property.
And why is it important to do a title search?
Well, it's required.
Required?
Yeah, I mean,
Is it a law? Is it
if you're going to get a loan, the lender's going to require it. Anyone could deed their property to anyone else, but it would be crazy to buy something without
not knowing
that you are getting what you are paying for. When we buy a house, you're buying the land that it sits on. The house is incidental.
Right.
Everyone's worried about the house, and that obviously that's where they're going to live. But the land is what you're getting. The land is forever. The house might not be there at some point in the future. It may not have been there in the past. So the standard is a 50-year title exam, and you are ensuring basically that there are no liens, judgments, missing interests, you name it. It's when we purchase that property and pay for it, we want to have it free and clear or subject only to the mortgage that we're signing at the closing.
So you're looking at past transactions, deeds that match identical as far as the layout of the land.
Yep.
Right? And then making sure everything has been cleared, released, discharged from past mortgages or anything on there. But if there's something that comes up, is that something you address, or who addresses that clear up for them to move forward?
So the seller side is responsible for providing clear title. The buyer's attorney actually performs the examination and notifies
says,
the seller's attorney, here's what we need.
Right.
And it's all about closing loops. So if we have a deed into John and Jane and only a deed out from Jane, what happened to John? Did he pass away? And sometimes on properties that have been established for a longer period of time, your title search could just be, parcel 1 on plan such and such. But then if we need to do we keep going back to meet our time requirement, we might have to get into the entire subdivision, the mother parcel. Was everything clear? Because if it came out of that and that's included in our chain, that needed to have been done correctly. So it can really balloon out, which is why I say, I might know something about this whole neighborhood.
Right, because you have past stuff. So do you find, did titles take a long time?
It depends. On
so an average title, like a week, 2 weeks?
No, it depends. Some of them are very easy. Some you might get, my own property, the prior owner was there for 50 something years. So it's a deed in from a piece of, a small parcel at the rear that they had acquired from an abutter, and 2 old mortgages, 2 old discharges. And that's it. That's beautiful for a title exam.
You must love when you hear people have lived there for like 30 plus years and you're like,
Sometimes. So that can make it very easy, very quick. Sometimes a property could have been foreclosed on 3 times. So then you have to examine 3 foreclosures. We've got to, this place has been sold 15 times. So that takes a lot longer.
Yeah.
Or it comes out of a, larger parcel before you know it, we're examining.
So I think people I think buyers forget about that piece because they're so looking at the house, right?
Yep.
But they're forgetting about that the protection when there's an attorney involved is the protection of looking at what they're actually buying, which is the land. The improvement on it is a plus for them. That's what they're looking at. But you're making sure that there's nothing on there. Now, you said the agreement, the title, and the closing.
Yep.
So the closing is, I'm assuming, just the lender's documentation for financing?
Or if it's cash, we still sign some, there's a settlement statement. We still sign some forms at closing. The closing, I think you call them paper pushers. Some attorneys just sign this, sign this, sign this, sign this. I never understood that. I'm not going to take someone through a closing where they're, borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and not explain things to them.
Great.
Sometimes you have investors, builders. This is daily. Justin, where do I sign? Okay, let's see the key terms. Let's get the package signed. Let's be done. That's not your average transaction. People should know understand what they're signing.
And you go through it step by step? I mean, I haven't been to a closing in a long time.
Typically, I give people the layman's term explanation of a form and just say, if you have any questions, stop me. Ask. I know everything that's in here. I'm happy to explain it to you. The settlement statement we go through step by step.
Usually before closing,
the note
too.
We go through. Your note is your loan, mortgage is your lien. So those we pay special attention to. The settlement statement. That's all their numbers. That's the money. And the rest, brief explanation. And if they have questions, I've seen all these documents. I'll answer everything.
So buying seems like. You mean you have to kind of have an attorney because the attorney's doing the lender's job in a sense? I mean, I see the other reason if it's a cash, but as a seller, I've had a couple of sellers say, "Well, I don't need an attorney," and I'm like, "Well, I can't draft your deed. Yes, we can put a purchase and sale together. Here's a form. We'll plug it in, but I don't create stuff." So, what is the benefit of a seller hiring an attorney for a transaction?
Well, there's protecting your interests within a significant financial transaction, and also the service aspect of it. So we handle all of our closings under power of attorney. So we will have met a seller client ahead of the closing at a time that's convenient for them. They'll sign deed, power of attorney, some other documents that we'll need for closing with us. I'll go through the settlement statement with them ahead of the closing, typically over the phone. And then day of closing, they don't have to go. They don't have to wait for a check or go, We sign everything for them at closing. We get them their copies of documents for their records. We get them paid. So there's the service. You're paying for a service. You're also paying to have your interests protected. Having your interests protected is more important, but it's nice to, especially when people are moving. Maybe they're buying a house the same day. Maybe they're moving out of state. Maybe they're gone. Sometimes people I'm out of the country. I'm halfway across the country for a new job, or even, 4 towns over.
So the service is really important because you can take care of signing off on everything without them having to worry about doing anything. Obviously, you're going to communicate with them, but you can sign everything. But what are some of the things that you notice throughout the transaction? It could be at the final end, it could be in the middle, that has come up for sellers that you find that have been very helpful to have an attorney?
Well, when I do an intake with the seller, again, we're finding out, is this our primary residence? If so, where are you moving? Because we need to typically vacate our property if someone's going to close on and purchase it. A lot of times people are buying another property, and we will handle both transactions for them, which, having the same person handle your 2 transactions just makes it so much easier.
Especially for the money transfer.
If they're closing out of state, then we would coordinate with the settlement agent that's out of state. So, just because I'm not handling that subsequent transaction doesn't mean I'm not facilitating it. And I also, when I do an intake for a seller client, I'm going to run not a full title exam, but I'm going to run their name, their history of ownership in the property to issue spot. A lot of times, one of the most common things you see is undischarged mortgages, typically on home equity lines of credit or home equity loans. People think, okay, I paid that off.
Yeah, we don't need it. Mm-hmm.
They never got the discharge. So, that's easy if you have time. If you wait for a buyer's attorney's title exam the day before the closing, which sometimes happens, or title, an order of conditions from conservation or something. If you're finding out these issues, the week of the closing, you might not be able to cure title in that amount of time. So doing the intake, examining their ownership, and getting that done week one of a transaction versus having to delay a closing over it.
And even so, how to get in touch with some of the banks to get those discharges, where a consumer, they don't have the paperwork anymore, so they don't even know where to start to get.
It does make it easier when folks have their own paperwork, but that was one of the things I did as a brand new attorney was tracking discharges and chasing down title curative for a larger firm. So I have it's easy with local banks because we know everyone. Right. It's more time consuming with your national banks, but I having done that so many times, I have. A lot of them if you can find an actual person, not the call.
Press 1.
Yes.
Press 2.
And I obtained all those people by, spending more hours than I care to remember on the phone trees and whatnot. But that's,
So I think about transactions, and my capacity as a real estate agent, I find the comfort of having an attorney involved, especially for selling, is when we're getting closer to closing. I find that I don't really need to have much conversation until we get closer. And what I find is a lot of the hurdles is final walkthroughs. Can we move in earlier? The buyer wants to move in. They want to hold harmless. They want to have access to the property. And the repairs not completed by the licensed professional from some home inspections. It's usually not such big ticket that we can't handle it, but tons of emotions going on. Everyone is angry and stuff. So I kind of go, let's call the attorney. Because it softens the blow. It's not that I'm dumping it on the attorney, because I'm not, because it's a team. But it softens the blow where they're all coming at you and saying, this wasn't done. Why weren't you doing it? And it's not us, right? It's just it wasn't done properly. Or maybe the walkthrough, they found a hole in the floor or in the wall that wasn't there, or somebody took an appliance that they weren't supposed to, things like that. I think that we had a transaction where they took the wood stove and we had to get the wood stove back. They thought that was personal property. It's like, no, that's part of the transaction. That was the only heat source actually in the building. So I find that if you have an attorney that can actually work, because I find that sometimes the attorneys don't want to get involved in those things. They're like, that's a real estate thing. But it's really not, because you have a binding contract that says everything.
Yep.
Do you find those kind of things more so be like a holdback? Do you see things not coming together? Do you feel like they all work out? Like, what are you seeing?
Well, our job is to solve problems as they arise.
Absolutely.
Holdback is one of, that's a hated phrase for attorneys. That just means we're working on this transaction
forever.
Hopefully not forever. But I mean, a lot of those things can be avoided if you review the contract with the seller and set the expectations of, here is what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Here is what you have to do. I will take care of the, conveying your property.
Yep.
Pretty much, you've got to move out. You've got to do any repairs or anything like that, and keeping them on track, keeping tabs with them throughout the process. It's not just a sign your contract, see you later. There should be communication throughout the process. But you can avoid a lot of those issues by setting expectations and coaching people up on, here's what you need to do, here's what I'm going to do, here's what your realtor's going to do. And then you keep tabs of everyone throughout the process and make sure it's all done. or you can give them, a little fair warning ahead of time of, hey, is this done?
What's one of the hardest transactions, or can you think of one that was just a real struggle and it was like it was really hard to close up? Anything you can think of.
Anything I can think of.
And if it doesn't come right away, it's fine.
Well, new construction is always more involved.
Oh.
New construction is always more involved.
You always tell me that.
Especially when we are dealing with like a custom build. Timelines can change. I try to tell buyers, especially, extensions are not the norm, but don't be surprised. And then you have to, monitor their selections. There's always there might be upgrades. You have to formalize everything and document everything all along the way. You're keeping tabs on what the builder's getting as far as compliance and occupancy and septic and water and you name it.
Right.
I've had all kinds of crazy things that
you could write a book.
The walkthrough thing. I had something straight out of a plot line from Always Sunny in Philadelphia this year. My buyers, I asked them, they show up to the closing, how was the walkthrough? Well, it was fine, but there's a cat in the walls.
What? It was stuck?
A cat in a vent. I don't know how. I don't know. Maybe they had a vent open to clean a vent, and the cat wouldn't come out. And I was like, "This is not." I don't know that's a lawyer matter, but that was a funny.
Oh my goodness!
They got the cat out, and we bought the house. But you don't want to have animals in the pets
left behind. Somebody left their cat behind.
I don't know. Yeah, they needed to be reminded. Maybe they had more than one. But I have dealt with far more walkthrough issues in the past year, I think, than any other year.
Like why? Like what are people doing? Are they not preparing the house for a walkthrough? Are they rushing? Are they doing the flip-flop thing where they're buying and selling the same day and they're not prepared? Like what is it?
I don't know that. And maybe I think a lot of realtors maybe don't ever go to the I don't go to people's houses. Rare instances, maybe elderly clients or people who can't get around or things like that, I'll go to them, but most people meet at our office. So I don't know. I can talk to my client and say, how's the moving? How's the packing? How's this? We need to, track our repairs and make sure we have, if there are, paid receipts and permits and whatnot. But,
I think that's a good thing you brought up because we always want to be everybody wants to stay in their lane, right? And so the lender has a lane, the lawyer has a lane, the real estate agent has a lane. But really, we all work together. So I think your point is taken where, if the real estate agent shows up for the final walkthrough, or if it's the listing agent and shows up in advance and goes and checks the house before, then you're prepared, right? Or you could at least a day before say, listen, there's a couple of things, take pictures. Do you mind if we keep them there? If not, you can get rid of them, right?
Yep.
Because really, you're right. You're not there. You don't know, how bad is the damage? What's the estimate? You're not going to be able to do all that. So it's almost like we're all in our lanes, but we all have to work together and we all have to do a little extra step. And we know which clients need the guidance, right? And the ones that don't. The people that do it all the time or every day, they know what they have to do. One thing that's been coming up a lot in my stuff is the deposits. So my clients, the seller side is adamant about making sure they understand when they can get that deposit if something doesn't happen. And then the buyer's not really thinking about I got to get out of this. They're not thinking about that deposit. How do I protect it? So I know that when we get to a point, say the buyer's time limit or, whatever the contract stated, it was beyond the time. How do you handle that? How do you recommend? What do you think it's best just to wipe clean, give the money back? You know what I mean? What do you feel?
That's entirely dependent on the
situation.
So,
but have you ever seen anybody file suit?
Yes.
Really?
Yep.
A seller filed suit or a buyer filed suit to
Both.
get it back? Really?
Both. I mean, a lot of times you'll have disputes over, inspections.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, part of this is tracking your dates. Anything to do with, is the deposit on the hook or not, can be found in your contract. And so tailoring the contract to that person's need, tracking their contingencies.
Right.
When I review the purchase and sale with buyers, especially people who might seem more nervous, or if we had more inspection issues or something like that, I'm like, well, the time for cold feet is now, not, the week of the closing when your contingencies have lapsed. Because once you give them that large deposit, then it may or may not be,
protected.
Your money's in the middle.
Right.
So
do you see a lot of that happening now? Or have you in the past? Because I actually feel it was, it's not as prominent. I think we're coming back to the home inspections. So I'm finding that, people are being careful on their deadlines, where 4 or 5 years ago, we didn't really have any contingencies. We didn't have to worry about it. But are you seeing that a lot? Like the protection of the deposit money?
Yes.
Really?
I mean, I do a lot of transactions with just we're buying land.
Oh.
For, a specific purpose. So that type of contract is going to be contingent on how many lots we can get out of it, whether we can get, a municipal approval for this type of to build this. So
what, do they miss their timetable?
No, no. I mean, not so much disputes, but contracts where you get well into it and then you end up terminating. I mean, I have had disputes over those, disputes in new construction where maybe a builder didn't do everything they were supposed to.
Got it.
You can get a certificate of occupancy and not finish a lot of the finished work or exterior work or landscaping, you name it, on a new construction property. And that often leads to, disputes over money.
Right.
I mean, maybe a seller took something from a property they weren't supposed to, didn't complete a repair, didn't do this. We discovered damage at our walkthrough that wasn't there when we inspected our walkthrough, or so that's when you're having to negotiate. I mean, sometimes things happen that are outside of anyone's control. A buyer loses their job. I just had, buyers just don't want to buy the property 2 days before.
I know, I had that happen. It's the most scariest thing in the world.
So I've had that happen a few times. A buyer or seller passed away in the middle of a project. That's no one can control some of these things. Right.
But those aren't I mean, the last one isn't, but I get it. I mean, when people lose their job, it's really hard, right? You just, sometimes they have no clue it's happening and it comes back. Just to kind of summarize and wrap up, what kind of advice would you give anybody, consumer, buying or selling? What kind of advice that you say for them when they start out? What kind of advice would you give as a lawyer?
On buying or selling? So
either one.
Yeah. Again, educating themselves on the process, finding reliable people to work on your behalf, local people. I know everything about this condo, that condo, this neighborhood, that neighborhood. My cousin's an attorney. That's great. I have a lot of cousins. They call me with questions about everything you can think of to do with the law. And I'm like, I'm not that type of, I can help them. I can connect them with someone, but I have a ton of experience in my field.
Right.
I'm not a criminal or civil attorney. Right. It's, so finding someone that is, has expertise and experience in this and sort of building your team of people that are going to help you. And it is important to use local people and people that have worked together. And
it reminded me more and more about having the local, because we try to keep it local, but honestly, I forgot about the titles and all that is important. So people, I know somebody in 50 miles away, but they might not know the area. So
Plus,
really
logistically,
important.
do you want to go drive
I know the
across
closing
state for your closing?
Correct.
On the day you have to move,
because you're going to have to show up.
Because yes, you do need to be present when you're, signing your
Right.
when you're borrowing, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Sure.
So.
Well, thank you. And I really enjoy working with you. Going to continue working with you. And where can people find you? Can you give us the name of the firm again and the address?
So Reynolds Law Office, our main office is on Main Street in South Lancaster. We also have an office 615 South Street in Fitchburg, and another office on Land Drive in Westford. So we cover a pretty good span in Central Mass, and that's for making things convenient for closings for folks, so they don't have to drive all over creation to close.
Well, I'll get your information too, and we'll share it at the end of this podcast. But I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And you can find me at the Leominster Coldwell Banker office. And please subscribe at anywhere that you get your podcasts. But more importantly, if there's a topic you want me to talk about, please reach out. And thank you so much. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you for having me.